Welcome back, everyone, to episode 12 of Rob Wells Music Talk. And today, man, oh man, we're in for a great time, great episode. I grew up watching today's guest on national television pretty much every day of my youth, and nervously finally found myself in a songwriting room for an infamous songwriting session with him in 2003. Infamous,
I remember that session, yeah.
Infamous being the key word. Today's guest has written songs for no biggie, but Diana Ross, Hilary Duff, Winona Judd, the Backstreet Boys, Tina Arena, Amanda Marshall, Rock Voisine, and many, many others. His best known song is the worldwide #1 hit for Alana Miles, Black Velvet, just a little tiny song that I'm sure you've heard of every now and again. He received the JUNO Award for Songwriter of the Year in 1990. Huge. In 1984, after a stint in the Second City Touring Company, he helped launch MuchMusic as Canada's first VJ. As a songwriter, he contributed 20 songs over 4 seasons to the soundtrack of the hit CTV series Instant Star, as well as writing songs for both Degrassi feature films, the latest Degrassi The Next Class, and Cirque du Soleil's Banana Spiel. His songs have been performed on idol shows around the world. Black Velvet has also recently been featured on CBC's Battle of the Blades, NBC's The Voice, Fox hit comedy New Girl, and my personal favorite, Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Love it. He has written 3 novels. As if this isn't enough, he has written 3 novels. His latest book, Is This Live? Inside the Wild Early Years of MuchMusic, was published by Random House Canada in October of 2016. He is currently co-hosting Famous Lost Words, a radio show and podcast featuring the best interviews you've never heard with radio producer Tom Jokic. An album of new songs plus a remake of Black Velvet is expected in early 2021. Man alive, that's crazy. Welcome to the show, singer, songwriter, author, Canada's first VJ, and my very, very, very sweet and dear good friend, all the way from beautiful Toronto, Christopher Ward.
Thank you, Rob. That was what an intro. Breathtaking. Did you notice as time went by that there were more and more projects that you were involved in as well?
I did notice that, yes.
Yeah, so you can assume some responsibility here, buddy.
Oh, I can't believe that I'm blessed to call you my friend and that, you know, we've co-written so many songs together. It's just, you know, I've heard you say this as well, like, you know, be a little leery of meeting your heroes because you might be, you know, greatly disappointed about, you know, how they carry themselves. But
yeah, I've had that happen. Yeah,
for sure. But man, I can't say enough about meeting you. And just it was the exact opposite. Meeting you was just such a breath of fresh air. And, you know, I had massive respect for you when I first met you. And I was told
that's all gone out the window, hasn't it?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Good. I want to make sure that we've settled into a reality of sorts here where, you know.
Yes, that's right. That's right. No, but you've been...
We've written some good songs together. Let us, like, this is something you won't say, but I'll say it. And that is that some of the best songs that I have written in the last 20 years have been with Rob Wells. So
thank you.
This is appropriate.
Oh, you're right up there too. This is the man that basically has reduced me to tears many, many times with the lyrics that he's written. One song in particular.
They were so bad. He could not stop himself. He was just weeping openly.
What was happening is he was chopping onions as he was writing lyrics at the same time. It's something that he does all the time. I don't really understand why. It does. It totally does. All right. Enough of the jokes. Enough of the craziness. Can we go back just a few years?
Sure.
I would like to know, where were you born?
Toronto, Canada.
Right where we are right now.
Yes, sir.
But I'm assuming that you've lived in many other places. And I know just a few little stories about you from your childhood, that you lived in your teen years, was it, in a couple of different places? Or did you move around a little bit?
We moved around a lot. I went to like 9 different schools. And I was always the stupid new guy. So I remember that feeling well of walking in and, everybody's hanging out with their friends because they've gotten back together after the end of the summer. And there's that sort of, they give you the look when you walk in the door, you get the worst seat in the room and yeah. But it does one of two things. You either like totally shut yourself down socially or you figure out how to read the room and how to get by. I think I took the latter point of view.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
9 schools.
Yeah.
That's something else. That's crazy. And eventually I remember you ended up back in Toronto at some point for high school, and that's where you met another great songwriter, Mark Jordan.
Yeah, Mark and I went to Jarvis Collegiate together. Yeah. And we've been friends ever since. So.
Did you know that you were both into writing songs at that point, or was that something that was...
Well, we both knew we played guitar and were singing and, we're kind of starting out, but it wasn't until after school was over that we ran into each other on the folk circuit. I have a little flyer from the Pizza Patio on Bloor Street, and it's got little drawings of both Mark Jordan and Christopher Ward, like one after the other, doing a gig at the Pizza Patio. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I would pay dearly to have a copy of that. So, okay, where did this whole musical bug come from? Are your parents musical in nature at all, or grandparents, or aunts and uncles?
Well, I mean, the only person that I know in my family who kind of lived by his creative juices was my Uncle Bill, who was a big ad guy. I mean, he was Mad Men. That was his life all the way, right down to the 3 martini lunches. But he was a really creative guy, and he was a painter and all that sort of stuff. So he really inspired me, and he always really super encouraged me to just pursue whatever I wanted to do. There were no musicians in my family. I mean, my father, well, I shouldn't say that. My father actually ended up later in life playing the bagpipes.
What a gentleman.
That's another story, because that would just only be to the shame and just so disturbing, the sound of the bagpipes when he played.
Just the launching of bagpipes when it's just starting and you hear the notes sort of like coming in. That would just...
I have a story on that if you want me to tell.
I would love to hear it.
You'll edit this out, and that's just fine. Okay, so we're having a big birthday party for me in Muskoka on this little piece of land, a sort of a jut of land that goes out into the lake. And there's barbecue, and there's all this stuff, and all my friends are there, and there's family members and so on. And my father has announced that he's going to show up with his bagpipes, and he's going to do a little something special for me. And it's like, yeah, okay, Dad. So he's coming down this set of stairs from the main building at this lodge, and the stairs are particularly deep. They're not normal sized stairs. They're really deep. The other thing that's happened, which is an unusual thing for him, he had a couple glasses of champagne. And I guess normally when you play the pipes, you can't eat. Like it somehow affects your ability to get the wind that you need in your wind bag. So anyway, the moment comes when it's his time to come down and perform for me. And I'm like, okay, everybody, we got to pay attention now. And you can hear him like echoing across the lake. And it's that sound you described. It's like, I was like, oh no, right? But couple it with the champagne glasses, and he comes down, but he misses each step just by a little bit. So it's like, it finally makes his way down, and he's like standing in front of my table, and he plays this song that he's written for me. And then he starts reciting like lyrics of mine, and then plays some more. It just was never ending. But, that's so. Like I say, there's a lot of music in my family, maybe even more than we wanted.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. So probably like me, I mean, like I grew up with music sort of being dictated to me. What I was going to be listening to was basically whatever my parents had on record players or radios and things like that. But at some point I discovered, my little thing. And I just thought, that's mine. That's all mine. Was there something like that for you that all of a sudden you went, aha, bingo, there's a song that really speaks to me. And that's the first sort of magical moment.
Well, I mean, I was sent for piano lessons. I had a German knuckle rapper for a piano teacher. So it was, I just ended up hating the instrument as a result, which is unfortunate. But I always wanted a guitar, particularly because, the Beatles came along when I was, a kid, when I was 12. So it was like, that was the total game changer of all time. But also when my parents gave me a transistor radio, I mean, basically they didn't see me for about 5 years. They'd run into me in the hall, right? Because I was just wired to that transistor radio. But yeah, what happened is we moved to Winnipeg, and in order to bribe me into kind of accepting the whole idea of moving, they bought me my first guitar.
Wow.
Yeah. And actually, I hadn't seen the guitar, basically since I was a kid. And I was at my sister's place, and it turned out she'd been taking care of it for me all these years. And I went, "What's that?" Because I saw it sort of stuck in the corner of the guest room, right? She said, "Well, that's your guitar." It's like, oh. It was a Silvertone, an archtop Silvertone with F holes from, I think it was from Simpson Sears or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So
but the first songs, I mean, Hush the Rising Sun, of course, the classic thing in my room, playing till my fingers bled, that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then Can't Buy Me Love.
Fantastic. Those are great songs.
Yeah.
All great songs.
Yeah.
And at some point you're practicing along with these songs, you're playing them. And then at some point do you think, well, maybe I should write my own song. Maybe I should try coming up with my own melody. Did that happen to you, or was there somebody that sort of showed you that sort of idea?
No, you see, this is the thing. I didn't know anybody that did anything creatively for a living, except, as I say, my uncle who was in the ad business. So the idea that you could make something and somehow that would be your life's work, that was completely foreign to me. What I did start doing was writing poetry in high school. And so for me, it was more lyric oriented, right? And I can remember, nervously showing, my grade 11 English teacher the poetry that I'd been writing. And he, fortunately encouraged me to keep going. But it was really not until I was in college that I started writing songs. And then I met my good buddy, Stephen Stone. And Stephen had been writing songs because he had bands when he was in high school. Really good band names too, like The What For? Or The Uncalled For. My favorite though was Rain Against the Sun.
No, you lie.
Which what are the letters for Rain Against the Sun? Huh? Rats.
It's genius.
It really is. So once I met Stephen, he'd been writing songs and he kind of knew things, like he knew what a bridge or a middle eight was. Like, I'm like, what? So he taught me a lot about songwriting, to say the least.
That's amazing. So you met Stephen, and I know just from talking to you over the years that you and Stephen joined forces together and did many things, including starting Trent Radio in Peterborough.
Yeah.
That's one
right.
thing you did. And then I know that there's some crazy stories about you touring Europe with Stephen. Were you playing covers? Were you playing originals at this point?
I believe it was a combination of the two. We billed ourselves as Captain Cookies and Major Milk. And our first gig was playing at a Playboy club in Ankara, Turkey.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Do you have
where else would you start? Right?
Oh, of course. Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I just remember being just stoned out of my mind, and I didn't know enough songs, so Stephen would do a little solo set of like 3 or 4 songs, right? And I'd be like behind the door of the kitchen waiting till he was done to come back out. Only what he would do is in a completely perverse mode is he would start subtly changing the words to the song. Like he'd start singing them and using all these obscenities and stuff because, the audience didn't know what he was saying. And I'd be on the floor shaking behind the door. Yeah, well, anyway.
That sounds absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Sounds like you guys had no fun at all.
No, it was bad. We shouldn't have done it. If there are any Turks out there who were in the Playboy Club, I apologize.
Great.
Yeah.
So you did many things. I know you were a radio host at one point in Peterborough on CKPT.
I did the all-night show.
Yeah, amazing. And okay, so you're writing original songs, you're performing with Stephen. I'm assuming that the original song bug really started to grab a hold of you because you eventually landed your own career as an artist and got signed to a record label.
Yeah, I got signed to Warner Brothers in Toronto. Amazing. And yeah. So, and started playing clubs and doing all the stuff that you do. It wasn't long, though, Rob, before I realized that what I loved the most was writing songs. Mm-hmm. And although I loved the process of making records, I didn't think that I was that good. And I thought, I don't want to go on the road and play these horrible places and all of that. So I started to shift more towards just pure songwriting. Mm-hmm. And that's when I met Alana. Mm-hmm. And on our first date, we got back to her place and she invited me in and I thought, yeah, And so she says, here, wait a minute. And she plunks me down in the rec room and she goes into her room and she pulls out a guitar and she comes back and she starts playing me these songs that she's written, right? And I was just bowled over. I mean, just like knocked me over with a feather, amazed at the sound of this woman's voice. Because she had it then,
Yeah.
So we started working together immediately. I mean, we became a couple for many, many years, but we spent a lot of our time writing songs and developing her career.
Yes, absolutely. You, from what I understand, when you were working at MuchMusic as a VJ,
yeah,
the idea for Black Velvet came to you on a trip to Memphis with Elvis impersonators. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, somebody at Much had the brilliant idea of sending me to Memphis on a Greyhound bus with 40 Elvis fanatics to mark the 10th anniversary of the death of the king. You know what I mean? I'm saying wrong. And so, they sent me down there and I had lots of time on my hands. So I had a notebook and I was always, still to this day, I put little bits and bobs in notebooks and things. And that's where the original ideas for Black Velvet came from, was from that trip. And so I finished it when I got home.
Did you know much about Elvis before that trip? I'm assuming that you listened to.
Well, I liked Elvis. I wasn't like a huge Elvis fan. I mean, these people on this bus were like seriously dedicated aficionados of the king. I mean, there would be like, I remember there were 3 women who were all, 3 generations of a family, and they would have 1 week of holiday every year, and they would get on a bus, and they would take that bus down to Memphis from Toronto for Elvis Week, and then they would run around and then go home, So 4 days out of the week was taken on the bus, and yeah, there was a 17-year-old kid whose goal in life was to be an Elvis impersonator.
Unbelievable. Yeah. The world takes all kinds, that's for sure.
Yeah, they were the loveliest, sweetest people.
I have to say, I have the first 4 lines of Black Velvet committed to memory. I just think that having worked with you and seeing your process, I know how important opening lines are to you in songwriting, and just how they really have to set the story, set the atmosphere. And nothing does it better than Black Velvet. It's just incredible. Just within 4 lines, you know exactly what's going on, and you're immediately transported from wherever you are in the world to that location at that time, and you're just there, and you just feel the sweat just dripping off of you, and just it's so fantastic. Even at the school that I teach at, I use 2 examples of yours always for telling people about opening lines of just how important it is to just really just hook people in. Just even the opening lines for The Beautiful Goodbye, that's also absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
What do you start with first? Do you start with opening lines first, or do you, when you're songwriting, or do you start more towards the center and the chorus and then branch out from there? How does it work for you?
Every way there is to do it, I've done it. It's just, and I like that, because then it's like an adventure. Because like I know some people, the hardest moment is this getting started moment. For me, I'm excited. It's like I'm all jazzed up, like I've just had that cup of coffee and there's this blank page. Garcia Marquez, the Colombian writer, always talked about the terror of the blank page. But for me, it's an invitation. And so I just generally start writing down the first thing that comes to my head, and then I start free associating, and then I'll go back and look at it. And if there's something in there that seems interesting, it could be an opening line. It could be a possible, part of a chorus. It could be a title for the song. And then I'll kind of build out from that moment.
Interesting. And how about for inspiration for the actual writing itself? Do you draw upon your own life experiences or other life experiences from other people or things that you've read? Where does that come from?
All of the above, Rob. All of the above.
Do you ever mix and match the two things together?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if people go looking for, biographical tales, I mean, if they know me really well, they might go, I wonder if this refers to that. And sometimes they might be right. But for the most part, it's just a weave. I mean, nothing is sacred in songwriting except the song itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have no obligation to tell the truth, to be representative of any series of events, whether they were in your life or somebody else's, or whether they happen in the news. It doesn't matter. All that matters is the song. So the song becomes the driver for the whole process. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I remember Alana said to me once, it might seem a little esoteric, but she said, at one point she said, "I know how you do it." And I thought, ooh. I said, okay, what's that? She said, "You imagine the song done, and then you just finish it."
Wow.
I'm like, oh. And I thought about it. And in a way, she's right. It's a little obscure, I know, but it's like it's like the sculptor looking at the block of wood and seeing the sculpture that's inside. There's that classic image, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you start out and even if it's one line, and for me, there's always a key line in the song. And if I see that one line on the page, doesn't matter where in the song it occurs, whether it's the opening line or whatever it is, it's enough to motivate me to go from there. And in Black Velvet, that line was a new religion that'll bring you to your knees. When I had that line, I didn't have anything else, but I had a song. And I knew it as soon as I wrote it.
So you started from
and
that line.
And I know exactly where it came from too. Because it's stolen, but not really. There was a woman who wrote a book about Elvis and his mother, because that was his principal relationship in his family. And part of her research took her to Tucson, which is where Elvis grew up, and to the church that he used to attend. And while she's at that church, the preacher is down on one knee, exhorting the congregation, Southern Baptist style. And she had this moment where she went, "Those are Elvis's stage moves." And so, hence, a new religion that'll bring you to your knees. The new religion was rock and roll.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
So
you started from that line and then branched out from there.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
But the verses, I mean, you've played the song with me. The verses are all on one chord. It's just dead simple. It's the classic shuffle groove, the run-to-dunk-to-dunk to groove, which is endless.
But the best part about that is just the tension that's built. And then when you finally release this, when it goes into the pre before the chorus, it's just, it's such a magical moment. The fact that you're just hanging on that one chord the whole time and you just are waiting for the change, and then you give it to us. And it's such a triumphant moment. It's fantastic.
Well, at the time that I was working on it, my neighbors didn't think so. Because I must have played that groove for 3 months, just waiting for something to drop in the slot and make sense musically, because I had some lyric ideas. And it's interesting because I actually went back and looked at the notebook that I wrote the original lyrics in, and there's some wacky alternatives that mercifully never saw the light of day. But I do remember just sitting there, you know the thing, you get yourself in this kind of trance-like state. You choose a riff or a chord pattern or a groove in the case of Black Velvet, and you just play the daylights out of it. And, the poor neighbors that have to hear that over and over again, right?
I have a very funny story where I was at a writing camp at Pure Music down in Toronto on Spadina. And it was over the weekend, so nobody else is in the building. We're just there and we're writing. And I thought, it's Sunday morning, it's really early, no one else is there yet. I have the key to Pure Music. I'm going to go in early and I'm going to work on last night's track. And, really just hone in on certain sections and loop certain sections. And so that's what I did. I went in early and I blasted it, and no one else is in the building, and I'm playing it and I'm looping this one section over and over for what must have been 45 minutes when finally somebody just came bursting through the door and said, "What are you doing? We are right next to you and conducting a meeting." And they were just livid. Just, paper thin walls in that building, and just literally right beside there were probably about 20 people that were conducting this big board meeting early on Sunday morning.
Well, they tried.
Yes, I know, exactly.
Now, that's what happens when you move in next to a musician,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to write Black Velvet, the lyrics?
I don't think the lyrics took that long. I think they took a couple of days.
Amazing.
Because I saw that, like, when I went back and looked at the notebook, it's the only reason I know this, I saw that most of the verse and chorus were shaped up in the first day. And then I guess a couple of weeks went by and I came back to it and I wrote the bridge. But the story of the bridge was that I was working with Alana and with Dave Tyson, her producer, gathering songs for her first album. And Dave said, what would be so great is if we had a shuffle. I'm like, oh, wait, hello. And so I got this thing I've been working on. So I played them the verse and the chorus of Black Velvet. Well, Alana just was like, oh, that's mine, Mm-hmm. And she just sang the daylights out of it from the moment it came out of her mouth, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And Dave said, well, do you have a bridge? I said, no. And he said, do you mind if I take a crack at writing one? I said, no, absolutely. So he went home and wrote the music for the, every word of every song and so on. And then I finished the lyric to that, and then we had the song.
I have heard that song performed all around the world in places where I've been, the most remote corners of the globe.
Yeah. Have you heard any good versions?
Oh, I've heard karaoke versions that are absolutely abysmal, but just, I think that somebody once told me that Black Velvet plays pretty much once, there's a new spin of Black Velvet once every second of every day, pretty much. That it's.
Oh man, is that true?
Yeah, I think so. It constantly plays, and it's a standard. You've written a standard.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a pretty great feeling. The best version, the worst version I ever heard was a German heavy metal band called Nailworks. And the best part was the album cover, because it had a bunch of nails on it, and you can see where they got that from.
Yeah. And
then on the head of the nail of each of the nails was like a little teeny tiny picture of one of the band members.
Genius.
But it was one of the sort of like the double kick drum kind of things. And the lead singer with the barfy vocal sound, the Black Velvet and that little boy smile, with the double kick drum. I got this in the mail from my publisher, and I was just so amused. And I was having dinner that night with Dave and his wife. I said, you guys have to hear this. So we went into the car right before we went in the restaurant, and I put this thing in. And midway through the first verse, his wife goes, "This is scaring me. I can't listen to this." She gets out and leaves. Dave and I go, "Oh, whatever." Listen to the rest of the song.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. You got to love moments like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Black Velvet comes out on the record. It wasn't the first single. I believe Love Is was the first single off the record. Yeah. Were you knowing when you finished Black Velvet, were you thinking that this has got to be for sure one of the singles that comes out? Was it planned that way? Did you know that you had something massive on your hands?
Rob, we didn't, honestly. The label loved the song. It was definitely going to be on the record. But no, we knew it was a good song. And Alana sang it so well. So it had a special place in our hearts pretty early on. But it wasn't like, oh, well, no, now we got the one. No, because, I mean, clearly, obviously, they started with Love Is as the first single. But as you may recall, in those days, there was this obsession with starting with an up-tempo song to begin the record. Mm-hmm. Both the, side one, cut one, but also when you're releasing things to try to promote the record. I knew that we had something special with Love Is because one night when I was working late at MuchMusic in an editing suite, and I came out right around the time that people were rolling home from the bars, like 1:32 in the morning, and I was standing on the corner of Queen and John Streets, and there's this drunk rolling down the sidewalk towards me at the top of his lungs going, "Love is what you want it to be." And I just thought, holy shit, he's singing my song. That was one of the wilder, weirder moments for me. And I think at that moment I thought, wow, we've made a connection somehow, to people.
Fantastic. Can we talk a little bit about The Beautiful Goodbye, Amanda Marshall?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, that to me is just, I remember hearing that song the first time and not realizing that you were the writer on that song. Just being absolutely blown away by it. Again, by the opening lines. You just had me in there right away. And just what a journey that song takes you on, and the power at the end, and just the emotion that you feel throughout that whole track, especially during the climax of the track. It's just, what an experience to go through it. And still to this day, to listen to it, it still stands up to today's standards. It's such a well-crafted song. And I have to ask you, was that inspired by anything, or did that take a long time for you to write?
Well, thank you for the kind words about this song. I'm very proud of that song. It's one of my very favorites that I've written. But I got to tell you, that song came originally from Dave Tyson. He had written not only the melody and the chords, but he had done an arrangement of that song so that everything, every syllable, every phrase, every accent was locked in place. And he played it for me, and I was blown away by this piece of music. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to write lyrics that match up to the beauty of this piece of music? But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, give me that, I can do it. And it took me the better part of 3 months to write the lyric to that song. Part of the reason why was because Dave was so connected to the music in himself, because he'd worked on it so much, that a lot of what I wrote, he was like, no. It's like, what about this? No. It's like, well, I've got something else for you today, Dave. So it was just, he was a taskmaster on that song. But you know what? He was right. And it's one of those rare occasions where it never felt overworked. It just kept slowly, incrementally getting better. And, it's like, you kids out there, if take your time with something if you have to. If it needs time, why not write a song that could be around forever? That could outlive you. I mean, why rush? I mean, so many times I hear people in writing sessions go, well, it's just the second verse. Nobody's paying attention. I'm just like, I'm aghast at the idea that you wouldn't want every song to be the best possible song it could be. I don't think of songs as being disposable. I mean, I'm sure some of the ones I've written have been, but it's not where I intended them to be. But Beautiful Goodbye, yeah. I mean, did it come from personal stuff, you're asking? I guess. Yeah, probably some of it. But it's not literal. I don't write literal songs. They're more a product of just pure imagination. And it's like I picture a setting. I try to picture the visuals. So kind of close my eyes and see where the song happens. And then it's almost like I open my eyes in this new space and try to write lyrics that describe it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's such great advice. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I too am a lyric lover. I wish that I could do what you do.
I know you are.
I love lyrics so much, and I as a kid, I used to just go down to the record store in Peterborough and buy a record, and I'd read every lyric on my walk home, and just without even listening to the music, just loving it so much. And to that person that says that that lyrics aren't important, second verse lyrics aren't important, maybe they're not important to them, but there's a whole mountain of people out there that love lyrics and they live off every word. And lyrics are
and you are one of those people, and which honestly, for a melody writer like yourself, usually people that have the skills that you do, and there are very few of them, but they are way more absorbed in creating the music. And it's not that the lyrics don't count, but they're just not as focused on it. But you, among all of the collaborators that I have, focused so intently on the lyric, and you would allow it, even just on the page before it had become a piece of music, allow it to move you to create, which just makes for a fantastic collaboration.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I mean, to me, sorry, I feel like you're interviewing me now a little bit, but it's music to me is all about emotion, and it's about communication. And where does it come from? It comes from the words for me. It really is. It's just like, that's the real driver right there. And I need to know what emotionally we're going for and what's on the page. And I've been so lucky to work with you, and you will come to me sometimes with 3 options or 4 options. I can't even believe it. Each one is just so great and it's amazing, but inevitably I have to pick one, and it's always the one that I read and just immediately the emotion jumps off the page, and I get it exactly what it is, and I know what it's got to be. We wrote a song that ended up going on Instant Star and Backstreet Boys and another, I think there was a Danish artist that cut it, and it's a song called There's Us. And the exact same thing happened with that. You had the lyric fully formed, all ready to go, and you brought it to me, and we sat there at the grand piano, and immediately your lyrics just jumped right off the page, and I knew exactly what it had to be, exactly just like somebody looking at the block of wood and knowing how to chisel away to get the shape that they want. I just knew exactly what it was going to be. You went and got a coffee, came back, and 10 minutes later it was all done. Your lyrics have the power to do that, and it's so rare for me to find that.
Well, thank you. I mean, I remember the writing of that song, and I remember that moment of hearing you play it back, and it was just like, oh my God, that's gorgeous. It's a pretty exciting moment when somebody takes your, little scratchings on a page and brings them to life and makes them sort of 3-dimensional like that. Because you see, most of the people that I work with, they don't want the lyrics in advance. They want you, to write either one or two things. They want you to write the lyrics while you're working on the piece together. You might offer up a title or something as a starting point, but that's about it. Or they would like, as Dave did, though, to give you the piece of music, and then you go home and start working. But that's, I call that syllable chiseling, when you're trying to ram these phrases and words into something that exists already. It's way better if there can be a flow back and forth. Or for me, it's just pure luxury to work with someone like yourself who's willing to just take the lyric from the page and go with it.
Well, for me, it feels way more free. It feels less constricted, just when you present something that was just naturally from the heart, that just you've written, and it's beautiful and it works as a beautiful piece just to read it. And then it's then my job to find a way to create the music around that. I find that a much more enjoyable process than it would be for me to create all the music and hand that over to you. I don't understand how you did it, but Beautiful Goodbye just sounds so incredible. Just knowing those circumstances that you had to write under, I'm blown away, because it sounds so effortless and so community. You know what?
I mean, when you've got something beautiful to start with, and you're committed to it, you can't help it. You're going to follow through and do what you can. I presume you realize, of course, that as you and I collaborated more and more, that I would try to make things a little difficult for you.
Yes, I noticed. Some lines that would be a little bit longer than others.
It's exactly what I would do. I would write sections where the lines didn't rhyme, and sometimes the line length and the scan would be completely different, but I would put the two lines together and they would make sense. So it'd be like, I could see the expression damn him, I'm gonna have to make this work because it makes sense on the page, right?
No.
Or things where the rhyme wouldn't pay off until the next verse. Like it was getting too easy or something. So what can we do to mess up the process here, right?
I loved it though. And it pushed me as a songwriter to start, adding, instead of a 4/4 bar, I'd add an extra 2/4 bar in there or something just to get that extra little word in there or something. And then it actually ended up taking our craft that much higher. And I loved co-writing with you, and the songs that we wrote together, I never would have been able to do on my own. And they're always going to hold a very, very special place in my heart. We're going to keep co-writing, I know, as time goes on.
I look forward to that. Well, I wonder, and of course I don't know what their process is or was, but I sort of feel like Bernie Taupin and Elton John probably work in a similar fashion, because I know that he would submit finished lyrics and then Elton would write the music. And I can imagine him, as his craft grew over the years, that he would, intentionally make these things more complex and more interesting and more challenging for a melody writer to shape up.
Amazing. Okay, we're going to get back to the program here. My questions that I have instead of the Wells Ward Love Fest that's going on, right? What would you say is more difficult, because you've had experience writing for yourself and writing for others? Which do you find more challenging? What do you find more pressure?
It's a good question. I'm one of those writers who likes working within a framework, who likes parameters. Like, for example, if you think about when we were working on the TV show Instant Star, it was a great setup because at the beginning of a week of work, the screenwriters and the scoring people and the producers of the show and all these people would be gathered together with the songwriters, and they would lay out the framework of how the episodes on that season were going to go. Who was going to break up with who and what was going to happen with this person and all the developing characters and so on. And I found that really inspiring because it was pretty tightly shaped. If you wanted to stick closely to the storyline and get your song in the show, that's what you did. But I didn't treat that as a restriction. If anything, it's like that thing when you're in high school and they tell you you're going to write a better essay if there's a very, very tight sort of brief in terms of what you're supposed to do. Sometimes, if you have too much space, it's hard to fill it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that said, I've just had a little moment in my life and career in the last year where I started writing songs again for myself for the first time in so long.
Wow.
And I was at home and I was writing, and I think I came up with one song idea, and I thought, because usually I kind of come up with ideas and then bank them and store them and use them for future collaborations. But this case, I came up with something and I went, well, I don't know anybody who's going to, want to write this or sing this, so I might as well just finish it. And so I finished it, and it was somewhat autobiographical. And then when I felt that I'd finished it and said what I needed to say, it was incredibly satisfying, that feeling of accurately representing something. So I kept going. And for the first time, Rob, in years, I was getting up every morning, rushing to the piano, rushing to the guitar, rushing to the notebook, and just pouring it out. And I had the biggest creative outburst that I've had in so many years. And a lot of these songs are going to be on this record that I just made. And it's such an amazing feeling to have found that again when it felt for me like it was lost, honestly.
That's amazing. I love that. That. What a joy. You have not made a record for yourself in quite a few years.
Oh, it's a few decades, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Did you find the process of creating this record that's about to come out any different than creating records before? Technology easier?
Well, no, I just absolutely denied any sort of progress that's been made in the intervening decades. I just kind of cut it old school style. And this was pre-COVID because, we talked about how we wanted to make the record. I work with two wonderful producer-writers who Aaron Chattervedi and Luke McMaster.
Amazing.
And I've written a bunch of songs with those guys, and they're great. And so, you know, when I had a chance to do this, I'm calling these guys and going, hey, can we do this? And they were like, yes, we're in, let's go. So we got together and we wrote some songs in addition to the ones I'd written on my own. But I said, here's how I want to do it. I want to have a live band, live off the floor. I said, I don't want them to hear the songs before the session. We're going to walk in. I'm going to pull out an acoustic guitar. I'm going to teach them the song. We're going to run it down a few times, and then we're going to hit record. And when we got a version we like, we're going to rinse and repeat and do it all over again. And we cut 13 songs in 4 days that way.
Wow.
And yeah. And you know what that's like. That's a different process than the way records are made now. You know, records are assembled for the most part in the digital space, you know, by pieces being added, like, you know, adding ingredients into baking a cake. That's great. And it works. And I've done it that way with many people. But my heart wasn't in it as much as this was in doing it this way. It was the joy of live players on the edge of their seats, like great musicians, having to pay full attention to every second of every minute of what was happening to make sure we got the best possible performance. And we did the same with the singers. They didn't know the songs. They didn't get a chance to hear anything before, and we just taught it to them. We didn't stack any parts up. We didn't, like, you know, multi-track all the background parts or anything like that. Literally, the singers each sing one part once. We didn't fly the parts from section to section of the songs. They sang it from top to bottom, and then we moved on to the next song. And I mean, maybe I got lucky, or maybe I just hired the right people, but it was a fantastic experience. And I made some music I'm really proud of too.
I've been lucky enough to hear a couple of tracks off the record, and I have to tell you, they are amazing songs.
Thank you.
They sound great. They move really well. They move me as a listener. Once again, I'm right there with you, and it's just sumptuous lyrics that just bring you along. It's such a treat to hear your songs, and it's great to hear you actually singing again. And
I was worried about that part. I got to tell you, man. I mean, because, you know, when you're singing just to write, you're kind of like, you know, that's all you do, right? Or if you're working with a singer, you sing just enough that they learn it, and then they go out and, you know, because they're the stars, they got to shine. But I actually worked with a vocal coach over a period of a few months by Zoom every week, and till I could kind of sing again.
Unbelievable.
I mean, Shawn Mendes is not worried. I wanted to assure you of that.
You're not planning on opening for Shawn when he goes back out again?
Well, you know, I'm waiting for that call. I think it'll come.
Right.
You know.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, it's great to hear people that chase their dreams, that realize what it is that they love to do, and that they follow their heart. Whatever their heart is telling them to do, that's what they do. And you have been doing this your whole life. It's amazing. Just all the different things that you have done. I mean, we haven't even gotten into a few other things here, but well, here's one thing I want to know. What would you say is one of your proudest moments as a songwriter?
Oh, you mean which song?
It doesn't have to be that, or it could be like a moment where you're recognized for your contributions, or...
Well, if I can be completely crass about it.
Please.
The day Black Velvet went #1 on Billboard Run. There's only two other days that rival it. The birth of my daughter, and when Joe Carter hit that home run over the left field fence.
Which you were there for.
And won the World Series in 1992. Yeah. Wow. Those are the three moments in my life. So, you know, I'd always followed the charts as a kid. I used to collect chum charts when I was a kid. And when we would go away for the summer for like a couple of weeks or something, I would bug my dad to let me go sit in the car at night so I could hear all those American radio stations, and I would hear all these songs I hadn't heard. And I made my own charts, and I would move the songs up and down the chart. And it mattered to me. And then when I was working at MuchMusic, there was a book I loved called The Billboard Book of #1 Hits. And each person who's written a #1 song gets a page in that book, right? Where they talk about how they wrote the song and the whole story of the song. And I love that book. And I love the stories that go with these songs that I've grown up with. And I knew, like, one of my first thought was, I'm going to get a page of the Billboard Book of Number 1 Hits. I'm sorry. It is just so crass of me to put it that way.
No.
You asked such a nice question, you know, like, what were you really proud of? I was like, well, I was beside myself. It's like that first time you hear one of your songs on the radio.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other feeling like that.
I find that feeling never goes away. I was in the grocery store the other day and I heard one of my songs and I just thought, wow, my first instinct was to grab the poor person that was working at the grocery store and say, I wrote that. I was part of that.
Yeah, that'll be $5.29, sir. Yeah.
Oh, it went number 1 on Billboard. I mean, like, that's the stuff that we can only dream about. And you actually lived it.
I dreamt about it for a long time. I never thought it would happen, but there you go.
You know, one thing that I remember when I first started working with you, I had very little success going on at that point. And I remember seeing and hearing about all of your awards and all the things that you had done. And I remember saying to you, I don't think I'm ever going to get to that point where I'm working with big artists and awards and stuff like that. And you actually sat me down and said, just keep at it and things will happen. And you were so right. It really is just sticking to it and doing things and things eventually will happen. But I think it's really being a good person, developing your talent and just being driven. But first and foremost, being a good person takes you a long, long way. And you were such a shining example of being a good person. Thank you.
You know, I think a lot of people forget that fact, but I don't know about you. I know, what am I saying? I do know about you. And we're similar in this regard. Like, when we have a good session, we are laughing our asses off from the beginning to the end. And when I hear that laughter coming from a room and other people are writing in there, I go, they're going to come up with a good song. Mm-hmm. It's like when you just get along with people and you listen, you maintain that curiosity that made you want to write songs in the first place. And you listen to what those people have to offer. I mean, then the process becomes joyful. That doesn't guarantee you that you're going to write a great song. But I think overall, over time, the results will show. You know, your work will get better and better.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. I would like to finish off with, speaking of laughter,
yes,
a funny little story. I don't know if you can share it with me or not, but from your MuchMusic days, something about, was it Latoya Jackson? Was it? You told me this years ago, and I wanted to hear this story again for the longest time.
You know, when I was in MuchMusic, I interviewed George Harrison and Paul McCartney and Tina Turner and Janet Jackson and Whitney Houston and Kate Bush, and you want to talk about Latoya Jackson.
Or Guar. The Guar story is also equally great. This is what I more gravitate towards.
The real good story, the best story is Motorhead.
Let's hear it.
Okay, we had a show called The Power Hour, which I never hosted, except for this one time when somebody was absent or sick or something, and I had to fill in. And the producer's like, well, you're going to be hosting The Power Hour because so-and-so's away. Okay. Your co-hosts are Lemmy and Filthy Phil from Motorhead. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. So we went down into the sub basement because it looked so grotty down there, right?
Yeah.
And then the record company guy comes to me and goes, well, they really didn't want to, they didn't want to do this. So I had to get each of them a 40 ouncer. I hope you don't mind. I'm like, no, it's okay. Just tell them to keep it under the seat where we can't see it. Okay. So that was fine. Lemmy's got his 40 ouncer Jack Daniels and Phil's got his gin or whatever it was. And the interview just goes to hell in a handbasket. It just deteriorates as each minute passes. And I've got an entire hour with these guys. So at the end, they are just raging away and singing in the bottles and the whole thing. And so I'm about to wrap up the interview. I go, okay, so all right, all you Motorhead fans out there, this is your chance. If you can answer this skill testing question, you could possibly win a life-sized poster of Motorhead. And they're like, what? So then they come into the set where I'm holding this thing open and they start eating the poster. And I'm not talking about like chewing it and spitting it out. I'm talking chewing it and swallowing it so that it's got huge bite marks all over it. Well, needless to say, it became a much more valuable giveaway item in the process.
For sure. Absolutely.
So, no, I will tell you Latoya Jackson, and you can edit this out if you want, but I was interviewing Latoya Jackson, and, true Jackson style, she had the whispery talking style, and so she was very nervous, kind of, sparrow-like in her demeanor. And in the middle of the interview, the fire alarm went off, and it was, we used to do the interviews at various places, and the fire alarm was this big red bell, like old school fire alarm, right above our heads, right? Well, the thing just started doing that, and it was just so loud that, the guys on the floor they went, well, do you want to go to video? And I'm like, no. So we just sat there, and I sat there, and Latoya's got this frozen look on her face, and I'm sort of smiling, and, she's like, is this live? Mm-hmm. She said, is there a fire? I said, oh. And Daniel Richler, if you remember Daniel, was one of the co-hosts of the New Music, had this leather jacket that he always wore. And he came over and stepped in behind us on the set and hung his black leather jacket over the top of the clanging fire bell, which had the effect of muting it. So it went from clang, 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 clang to... And so we more or less finished the interview that way.
Oh, that's so great.
Ridiculous.
Oh, I love it. The fun you must have had on that show, that station. The interview with you and Guar, I will never forget that. That's one of the best moments, not just for the fact that, it's Guar and it's you, but you are on comedic fire on there, asking one of the people if they were recently in Peter, Paul and Mary. I remember it at one point. Totally. It's so good.
I don't remember that at all.
There's some guy named the Sexecutioner, and he's like, and of course you know who I am, and you're like, oh, weren't you in Peter, Paul and Mary? So great.
Oh, I have some things to be ashamed of or to answer for, I know. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. My friend, Dr. Christopher Ward, as I like to call him. I cannot thank you enough. I appreciate you so much in so many ways, but even more so for coming on this show and being part of this and answering all of my stupid questions and me interviewing the king of interviewing himself.
And by the way, where's the poster? Because it's time for me to eat it.
Oh yeah. I'm thinking the poster of the vineyard behind you maybe might be quite nice.
I'll start right in on that then.
That would be great.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Oh, thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is singer-songwriter, author, Canada's first DJ, my very good friend, Christopher Ward. Thank you so much. If you have enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate it very much. And we'll have more interviews coming your way and more musical information tidbits coming your way as well in the coming weeks. Thank you so much. Take care.